We are on the sound check. On the sound check. Hopefully we're crystal clear. That's a good mic, baby. All righty. Let's do what we came to do. You've tuned in to the A+ Coaching Corner with yours truly, Carvel Monroe. Here you're going to get VIP coaching that's virtual, interactive, and practical. Listen, I began my life change decades ago, and I'm still pursuing greatness today. I've been involved with mentoring programs since 1999. That's when I won my first award, and I was featured in the Harvard Gazette for volunteering in the Cambridge Public High School. Since then, I've directed multiple mentoring programs on the East Coast. I've owned and operated a decent small business, working with my hands. I have 20 plus years in the marriage game, raising 3 children, and I've supported many others all the way to adulthood. I have taught people facing some tough circumstances, even in the county jail. But today, I am here just for you, in the A+ Coaching Corner. All right, everybody, welcome to this episode, the very first in a 5-part series that I'm doing that I'm calling my student success coaching specifically. And so this is one of 5. And so for those of you who have accustomed or been in the coaching corner before, you probably know the presentation. And if you're new, just hang on in for the ride and stick with me. So it's a 5-part series, and I want to take you to an ending place that's going to be very fruitful for you. So this first episode is called Reflection Point, and I'll get into the details. You know how we do it. Normally, my presentation is not necessarily all well polished here. However, my goal is to present it to you in such a way that I can keep you active and engaged, and then we'll flesh out the rest later. So this is one of 5, Reflection Point. I'm going to start my clock in a little while, so you know we're not going to belabor the point. We're going to keep this within an hour, and I'll be done, I'm pretty sure, before that. So thank you for those of you watching right now, and for those who will watch this later. And so my sessions are totally free. And then typically I will have some downloadable digital content that you can purchase later on as a way of supporting, and so on and so forth. My mic is all in. So I'm wearing the big over-the-air headphones because, couldn't find my other headsets. Nonetheless, so let's get into this reflection point, and I'll tell you why I wanted to do this student success coaching coming off the end of a year of teaching. And when we got to the end of the year, I had a few students that came up to me at some point during during those last final weeks of school, and they would say things to me like, "Hey, Mr. Monroe, you want to nominate me for such and such," right? Because they were doing year-end awards. And then it's like the light bulb came on where some students realized for the first time, I guess, that what happened throughout the course of the year matters. I know. So let's make this applicable to everyone, because you may not be a student. We're all student in some way, in some form. We're just at different stages, right? We're all learning at different stages of the game. So I'm a student, even though I'm a teacher, but I'm still a student because the lifelong learning is really a thing. If you're employed, you know that. And when you get a new job, you know that. And when something changes along the path, you know that, because there's always ongoing learning that you must do, professional development, something to kind of up your game, right? Upskill is the new thing this day. Upskilling, that kind of a thing, because new technology comes out, AI, so on and so forth, new projects, and you always have to do something to learn or increase your knowledge, your skill, your attitude to where you want to go and what you want to do. So anyhow, so we got to the end of the year and students started to panic, in a sense, frantic. Some of them who surprised me asked me for me to nominate them for something. And I'm thinking, full well, that would be a big stretch for me to have to nominate you for anything, because you gave a fight all year, and I don't mean a good fight. So anyhow, we're going to work through this thing here. And I want you to think, no matter where you are in life, 1 year from now, I like to say 1 year from now, 9 months from now, whatever, what's going to be your thing a year from now? I like to say it like this: will you be celebrated, or will you discover that you were just tolerated, right? And that might be a little harsh for some of us, but it's the reality. A year from now, at the end of the project, at the end of a season, at the end of a semester, whatever you have in your agenda, will you, at the end of your employment, let's just say that, when it comes time for the annual review, right? Pick a spot. Will you be celebrated, or will you discover that you were just tolerated? So keep that in mind as we work on through, because my goal for you and for each of us is that we put up a good fight. We run a good race. We make it hard for people to have to overlook us, number one, or we make it hard for when they come to choose, they gotta say, it's a tough choice. If you were in the same situation, if they had to choose, even if you didn't win, you gotta be a contender. I like to say, put in some grit, some effort, some hard work, some determination, so that even if you don't get selected, it was a hard choice for them to have to make, right? Because you can do a lot of good things, all the right things, or a lot of the right things, and we might not get the outcome. And I understand we cannot control outcome, but we can control our effort. We can make a determination to show up every day, to be strong, to be diligent, and just to, for lack of a better term, give them hell, right? Put it all out on the table. Leave nothing undone. And so that when it comes to the end of the evaluation period, whatever that might be, whether it's a marking period or a semester, or like I said, the annual year of some sort, let it be that people have to think and say, wow, so-and-so, they were really spot on, and make it hard for them to have to pass you up, right? Anyhow, so that's my point in where we're going with this. So let me start the clock before I forget. I'm just going to run the little clock right up there above the board so you can kind of see, for those of you who are watching, your time. So you know that this will not pass that time frame. So let's keep it going. So we talk about, will you be celebrated, or will you discover that you were just mainly tolerated? All right. So let me pause for a moment before I run, because I can run sometimes and not think. All right. So I talk about all that. All right. So let's train your brain. And part of training your brain is this. So let's jump to what the problem is with us, right? So I tell you the problem with us. So let's close this out. The problem is with us along the way, along our journey sometimes, because it's typically long, we tend to forget about what matters, right? And I won't say what matters most because a lot of things matters most. And it's hard. And sometimes it's not a matter of what matters most because it all matters, right? But we don't want to lose sight of what matters, right? So if showing up every day matters, good. If you have things at home that matters, yes, but let's not lose sight of any of them then, right? Because they all matter, and I don't want you to have to choose, but we cannot lose sight of what matters. And so in the opening story that I shared, I talked about the students who came to me at the end, and a few of them here and there, different classes, different time periods would say, hey, can you nominate me? Can you nominate me? And I thought, well, somewhere along the course of the year, somewhere along these past 9 months, these students had to have forgot that the end of the year was coming. There was going to be a recognition or reconciliation, so to speak, of our time. And somewhere along that way, whether it's 2 months in, 3 months in, 2 quarters in, something, they forgot. And they let down their guard. They lowered their effort. They let down their intensity. They got distracted maybe. They got involved into things that changed them off the course if they remembered, right? And I don't want that to happen for you. I don't want that to happen for me. And so we have to find a way to keep things that matters at the front and center. And you've heard, some of you who've been around before, I share the story of how I used to direct this mentoring program at my local church on Friday evenings. And I was honored to have that position, right? Working and helping to provide mentoring, just having that loving, caring adults and multiple adults. I wasn't the only one in the lives of these young people. Some of them may not have had a father figure, or some of them did have a father figure, but even smart men know you need other good men around your young people, right? So even if you're a good parent, like many of you are, if you're watching, sometimes it's just it's increasing the density is how I've learned it when I was working at this nonprofit, increasing the density of caring people in the lives of child. So in other words, it's not just one, you need a bunch of caring people around young people to keep them going. So I've learned it there. So while I'm running my race, I don't want to forget about my own children. I talked about that mentoring program because while I was showing up on Friday nights, creating curriculum and activity for these boys, I didn't want to lose the race at home, right? I didn't want to show up on Friday night and be this golden, shining example for these young men who are not my own. Meanwhile, I forget what mattered most, or what mattered to me, which was my own children at home. And so while we're running our race, we don't want to forget. So hopefully I've driven that point home. So some sort of a way you got to keep in mind. So let's come off the end right now. And right now we want to line up our perspective for where we want to go for this next year, or for this next 3 months, 6 months, whatever your time frame you're working with. What I have to share and where I want to start is, and I'm going to give you 3 points that we're going to work with. Here we go. And for those of you taking notes, you can just do a screenshot if you like, because I put it right there. You're just not going to hear, or you can hear where I'm going to fill in the part. So the first thing I said, we're going to start with some reflective work. Before we move forward for this next 3 months, for these next 6 months, for the next 9 months, whatever time frame you are working with now, before we move forward, I want you to start with the end in mind. This is what you've heard this saying before. Begin with the end in mind. In other words, whatever our target is, whenever this next season comes to an end, we want to find out, we want to be celebrated, we want to be recognized, we want to leave a positive impression on people no matter where we are, so they know that this joker showed up to put in work, right? That you want to make sure they know that you showed up to do whatever it takes to drive, to achieve those goals, right? To make those deliverables, whatever term you want to use, right? And it doesn't necessarily, if you're a student in the sense of an academic setting, it doesn't always mean getting an A. It show up, doing the right thing, playing a part, adding value to the learning, all those kinds of things, being present, right? Challenging ideas, refining ideas, whatever it might be. So reflective work. Begin with the end in mind. So think about where you ended your last project. Think about where you ended your school year. Think about where you ended whatever project you just had to work on. How did it end? Let's start with a bit of reflection. This is the activity that I have set up, and I put it this way, and I've shared this with some of my students. How did the year go for you? If you can give it a number 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest grade you can give it, and 10 being the highest. How was your year, right? And so reflect on it. How did you do? When I'm saying year for you, it might not be a whole year. It could have been just your last project, your last assignment, your last presentation, whatever. How did it go? Would you give it a 1 to a 10? 1, it was lousy. 5, yeah, and somewhere in the middle. It's kind of mid, right? Or you can give it something higher, 8, 9. So number 1, you start off by saying that, right? Give it a number, and then you might say to yourself, okay, how would you close the gap? What would make the difference, right? What would make the difference to make that number? For example, if I gave myself a 7, I said, well, I was more than average. I was a little bit on the high end. However, I give it a 7. I would say then what would make it an 8, or what would make it a 9, right? So whatever your number might be, if you said you gave yourself something like that, consider what would make it 1 or 2 point higher, right? That's very important, right? So in the scenario of my students, maybe somebody would have said, hey, somewhere along the line, I kind of forgot that, or let's just say this, I didn't do my homework. I didn't do homework consistently, right? Using my student, for example, that might be their example. For you, it might be different. Maybe you didn't show up to social events, I don't know, on the job. Maybe you showed up, but you were not as engaging. Or maybe just on the job, you were not as engaging. You did your job, but you weren't very cordial with people. Maybe you had your defensive up, which might be a thing, right? So I can just throw random examples all day, but you get the idea. So what would make it 1 or 2 numbers higher than the number you gave it? Okay. All right. So let's move on just a little bit now, because excellence is progressive. That's how I've learned it when I was growing up. Excellence is always moving forward. So we're having a reflection point. Now, I've got up some points on here on my screen that it says point A, under reflective work. The first one it says point A, or if you want to call it at my sub point A. You got to be honest, right? Be honest with the grade that you give. This exercise does not work if you're like very dismissive. If you say things like, well, I don't really matter to me, or everybody's out to get me, or something. Where don't be dismissive, right? Find the truth in it, connect with that truth, and be honest about your reflection, right? I didn't give it all that I had, or that kind of a thing, or I just messed up, or I got discouraged, or I just found it too hard and I didn't ask for help. Find it. So be honest with the process. Number 2, or the second part in here, focus on the effort. As I've shared earlier, we can't always control the outcome, right? We don't necessarily always get what we want, right? We don't always get what we want, but we can focus on our effort. And that's where I want you to look. Did you put enough effort in? Did you show up and fight like a dog? Did you contend for what you want? And did you do it over and over and over, right? That is something you can control. All of us can control. That is something I can control. Now, whether or not I win the prize, is another story. We know that there's actors who show up at, or actors who will do a movie, and they'll rehearse the part, and they'll prepare for the part, and they'll study, and they'll spend hours, and they'll kill it, right? They'll nail the part down. They understood the assignment, and they might not win that Grammy for whatever reason. So, but they can control the effort, what they put in. And that's what we're talking about here. All right. So we're talking about being honest. Then we said, focus on effort. And then we did the analyzation and the contrast in part, analyze and contrast, right? And that kind of ties back into where I was saying, okay, what would make it 1 or 2 steps better, right? Or a higher number, what could be different? And I think that summed it up. Let's keep this rolling. And if we have time, we'll dive back in, because I got 34 minutes and I'm going to end on time. So here's my second point. So we're going to start with some reflective work, right? Because we're saying 6 months from now, 9 months from now, whatever it is, we're going to show up again, and we want to make sure that this time we have contended. So we start with reflective work. The second thing is we're going to make some markers and some memorials, right? Let's some markers and some memorials. What do I mean by that? Sometimes when you go through any situation, they say learning is ongoing. It's never the end. It's almost like a comma, right? Or it could be a period, but it's going to be a next sentence after. And what I mean by that is you have to use that now and learn from it, right? So let's make some markers, right? Have something in mind that you can mark the moment. So when we just go through a hard time, we want to make sure that we use that as a marker. Or if we ended up in a scenario like that. So if I was a young person and I got to the end of the year, or maybe I showed up on a graduation, for example, and I see other people getting awards and accolades and recognition, and I got left out. I did not get nominated. I got overlooked, or whatever the term. I just didn't get it. That would be like a marker for me. I would have that image in my mind, right? Maybe I look back at my photo. I would have that in my mind, and that would be like a marker that I would set up, and I would remember that moment so that I will look back on that from time to time, and that will be my motivator. I hope that makes sense for somebody. So sometimes we want to rush through a negative event, and we want to rush through it real quickly, right? We don't let it soak in. I want to see if I still have this image that I was looking at. I save some from time to time. I've saved some stuff. I'm gonna see if I can find one real quick, and I'm gonna see if I can share it with you. We go through these events, and sometimes we rush our way through it. Let's see if I can find it here. Let's see. All right. So this is a small version, but more than anything, I just want you to hear it. So let me set it up real quickly. I found this online, and I don't know who originally shared it. However, it seems like there's a young person who got themselves into some trouble. All right. That's it right here on the screen. They got themselves into some trouble, and I guess this is where the parents come.
I'm sorry you got to go through this, but all you had to do was listen to your parents. Okay? Okay? I don't know how things gonna turn out for you. I ain't got no idea how nothing gonna turn out. No idea at all. Okay, I had to tell them that I pick y'all up. Okay? I had to tell them I pick y'all up, okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. But I didn't know nothing. I didn't know nothing the second I told y'all don't tell me nothing. Didn't I tell you that? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, baby. So I'm so sorry you got to go through what you're going through. But if God help you out of this, please get yourself together, baby. And it's going to take a miracle. It's going to take a miracle that we don't have. You can turn me loose now. You can sit back down because I don't know what's going to happen, baby. I don't know what's going to happen. Your grandma don't know. Ain't nothing we can do to help you now. It's all over now. I know. It's a hard pill to swallow. You see my brother no more. No, nobody. That's why when you have your precious time, it should be precious time. I didn't get to get that girl right yet. Well, Andre, you have to.
All right, I'm going to pause it right there, okay? Because I think that's enough. So this from time to time, I come across content and I will save it. And I save it because I'm always lurking, right? And I just save them in my little, wherever I save them. See, I said everything is content. I have these magnets as things for the content. And I've had these for a while because life comes with lessons. So this is a grandmother in this video. I guess this is the police camera that they will have in an interrogation room or whatever, one of these in between rooms. I think it is a tech because I see the two chairs. And so anyhow, so the grandmother, something happened based on what we just heard. She goes and picks up her grandson. She said she didn't want to know what happened. Less she knows, the better. She was just doing her grandmother job. Nonetheless, it seems right here, though, that this child got caught up. But he's now in this room. He's at a reflection point, I call it. He is at a reflection point. Something has happened to him that's crazy. I don't know how, it's got to be serious based on how grandmother and how he's breaking down. So now my point is this: when we go through a situation like this, we shouldn't be in a rush to turn the channel, so to speak, right? We should use this moment. We should use this moment to learn from it. We got to let this moment that we encounter really deal with us. That's my point that I have up here. We got to let it soak in, right? We have to let it soak in, like pay attention to what's going on in this moment. Now, this is a totally different extreme from where we're talking about, but it illustrates the point. We have to let it crush us. Let it cut, let it crush us. If you really want to make change, right? When you go through an experience where you fall short, and that's what we started off with. You didn't get recognized, you didn't get the goal, you didn't achieve. You can't be in such a rush just to move on or to minimize it, right? Or act like it didn't matter. Now, you have to let that situation really speak to you. You got to let it soak in. You got to let it cut you so you feel it. You got to let it crush you because there's something in you that needs to be crushed. When you don't achieve, when you don't do your best, when you don't put in that effort that it requires all the time, we have to realize that part of that is us, right? Now, we know there are things that's out of our control, but all we want to do is make sure the part of us that's proud or arrogant or lazy or, selfish, whatever that term that you think it is, we want to make sure that is crushed to the point that it doesn't hinder us anymore, right? And I've been there before, not in that situation, but in these situations where I know I'm at the bottom. And I like what the grandmother said. If God makes a way, something like that. If God gets you out of this, right? I don't know what happened. And that's not the point. The point, though, is this thing is running its course. But if God gets you out of this, then you have to do something different, right? And I know how many of y'all have made one of those prayers where you negotiate with God, right? God, if you get me out of that. So anyhow, so you got to let it soak in. You got to let it cut you. You got to let it crush you. And then you got to resolve within yourself. What I mean by resolve within you got to make a decision like, I'm not going to be in this place again. That's what I mean. I am not going to be in this position again. I'm not going to get to the end of the year, end of the semester, end of the project, or end of this job and let it, fall short. And I mean fall short by not giving my best, fall short by not showing up and having that intensity to move forward, right? Fall short as in making poor decisions, right? Because sometimes we know and we have time and we make poor decisions. I don't know exactly this scenario from the video, but you get my point. So that's the second thing. It becomes a marker, and I say a memorial. If you can, sometimes you got to take something physical from that situation, right? So for this video that we just watched, I'm gonna go back here. For this video that we just watched, maybe there's an arrest report. I would hold on to that arrest report if he gets out of this. And that will be my marker, right? To say, I'm never going to return to that place again. I'm never going to put myself in a position for me to be in that again, right? So I said, maybe he can take the arrest report or something. Or if he can't, part of that memory of having my grandmother have to go through this with me, come up here, that hug, whatever, that's going to be a part of the marker and the memorabilia, if you want to call it, the memorial that I'm going to set up so I never forget, because we tend to forget. And the way our society works, sometimes it gives you the headlines. It shows you what's happening now. And by 2-3 days from now, that headline is gone. They show you a headline for something else. And sometimes we don't see things play out. And I think subconsciously we can take that into our life where we don't see the full ramifications of something because there's no follow-up. Well, you don't want that. So you got your reflection point, right? you're beginning to take note of what happened. And now you're setting up these markers and these memorials that you'll, every time you look at. So our country have the war memorial in DC or Virginia. I forgot. Anyhow, where they have the Arlington National, there you go, Arlington National Cemetery, where they have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of soldiers who died in the line of duty. That memorial is set up so that we don't forget. So is a marker for freedom, or it's a marker for sacrifice, right? Year after year, we have the 9/11 kind of reflection and memorial time. That is a marker. And we hear people say, never forget, right? You hear terms like that. So we got to do that in our personal life, right? We got to treat things like when we fall short of our goals, when we fall short of doing our best, sometimes we got to treat it like that critical, where we don't just let it slip and slide and we don't think about it. We set up these memorials. Let's move on. My third and final point, right? See, we're doing really well. All right, so we're talking about that, and hopefully I haven't forgotten anything, but I'll do cleanup in the end like I like to do. So let's go on to the last one. So after we have done this reflective work where we're honest with ourselves about how our performance was, our effort and all that, and we make some comparisons and some contrasts on what would make it better, what would I have done differently, what would I change, that kind of a thing, right? After we've done that, we said that's our reflective. We do some reflective work. Then we said we're going to have some markers and some memorials, something that we take, and hopefully we can have a visual representation of that failure, that letdown, right? Or whatever it is. It could be a photo with you and your friends, and and they got the award or something, and you don't have it. Keep that photo, right? That'll be your memorial, anything like that. And now let's jump into our third one and final. We say from now, moving forward, now you have to make a pulpit and a promise. And I'll explain what I mean by a pulpit and a promise. And you can see it in some of my subpoints that I have up there, right? So after you've been crushed and you let that thing speak to you and crush it, all of you, you're down. Now it's time for you to stand up. And stand up is just another way of saying it's time for you to bounce back. Don't stay there. Don't stay in that mode where you've got the memorial and all you're doing is just you're weeping and you're down and you're discouraged or you're depressed. I'm not saying stay in it like that. I am saying don't move on too quickly though, right? Don't move on too quickly. Let that thing do its work in you. Let it work in you to the point where you now got the resolve in you that I'm gonna stand up, as it says here. I'm gonna bounce back. I'm gonna do better next time. I'm gonna give them a run for my money. I'm gonna be a contender, right, for everything, and I'm going to show up every day, and I'm going to contend for my goal, for my desires, for whatever the plan is, or whatever for the assignment. Now that's what I mean. Now then you stand up. Okay, so I'm not saying stay in some sort of pity party. All right, stand up, and I say speak to it. Speak to your future. Sometimes at that point you got to say something, right? Whether you're saying it to yourself or you're saying it to others, right? So you might say, you know what, man? Something as simple as like, look, next year this time, I'm going to be in the run-ins. Next year this time, if I gave myself a 5 on my reflective work next year, I'm going to be more like an 8 or 9. Right? Speak to it. And I say speak to it, and this is not this name it, grab it, blab it, grab it thing, but it's important that we make our confession what we believe's got to come out of our heart. And we know that our words have power. I'm not going to show it on the screen, but I've shared this in the past. The whole thing that says, watch your thoughts, because your thoughts become your words, and your words become your actions, and your actions become your habits, and your habits, so on and so forth. You get my point. And I forgot who said it, but you can Google that. So at some point, we've gone through the reflective work. We've done that memorial. We have the thoughts now of doing better. It's our resolve. So now we're saying speak to it, because now our thoughts is going to create some words that is driving our life in the right direction. So we're speaking to that end. We're speaking to that future. Next year it's going to be different, or, the next job is going to be different. I'm going to go in there, change. I'm going to excel. I'm going to do right next semester, next quarter, whatever term you want to use. right? Make your pulpit. Now think about what a pulpit is from our society. A pulpit is where someone stands behind it, right? And they speak, they declare, they present. That's what I say, make it a pulpit. So now you got a memorial. Now you make it a pulpit. Wherever you are, that's your pulpit. It could be in your bedroom, right? It could be in your bathroom, right? In your shower. I don't care. It could be in your backyard on the basketball court. Make it a pulpit that where you say, nobody needs to hear you either, but you just speak it out of your mouth and say, look, man, I'm not going down like this again. I'm going to be different. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to make people recognize that I am somebody by my work. I'm going to make it hard for people to overlook me. Say it like that if you have to, right? If that's the case, right? And so you speak to your future. By this time, next year or next month, I won't say next month. Most things take some time. So I'm going to just say, I'm going to go with that. And then lastly, I say to write it down. Obviously, we've heard this before. This is not some super deep thinking, but it's important to write something down. Write your goals down. Post stuff up, right? Because when you forget, right? When you forget, remember I say along the way, the journey is long, right? Most of what we're doing, it's that marathon type of a thing. It's not the sprint. And so we tend to forget, or not just forget, we can remember, but lose heart. But when you write it down as well, that's going to help you remember. And then you're going to see your writing or whatever you've created, dream board, whatever, action plan, whatever, right? So this in a nutshell is it, without belaboring the point and going any further. We're talking about, hey, how do I become someone who's celebrated and not tolerated, right? This is the ultimate goal. And it's a future work. It's 3 months out. It's 6 months out. It's 9 months. It's next year. When I come to the end of my next grade level, right? When I go to retire, how do I make sure that I'm celebrated, not tolerated? And that just basically means I'm going to show up and go to work and do my best. All right. I'm going to leave it right there because I think I've said all that I needed to say. All right. And good. No comments. So this is the very first part in 5. Next week, that's the best way I can do it. I'm going to get into a professional. That's the next one, right? This is a good little 5-part series, very short. So stick with me and I'll be back on Tuesday of next week. And we'll do the second installment of this same time, 9 o'clock, and we will get it going. That's all I got to say. All right. So that's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed all you've heard and seen. That's my old pitch. Hey, we're done. Get out of here. Go do something. So by the end of this series, I will have this downloadable piece. If you want to purchase that for your work, for your future, maybe you can use this as your memorabilia because I'm going to have it listed and we'll have some worksheets in there that you can work on. Maybe you can keep it on your computer. So I'll have this up for you on thecoachingcorner.com or coachingcorner.com. It's not going to be there today, but keep that in mind. So next week on Tuesday, we'll be here again and we'll get to the next part in this, 2 of 5. Hey guys, appreciate y'all. Thank you all for stopping by. And until next time, peace.